but I've never done anything with such purpose and with such longevity, and also the whole fundraising thing like this. So it's really developed, and I've just been making it up as I'm going along in many ways.
Hello, and welcome to Every Moment is a Choice. I'm your host, Erica Behel, and I invite you to join me on a transformative journey to uncover the extraordinary potential that lies within every single moment of our lives. From the choices we make in our relationships, careers, and personal growth, to the mindset we embrace in the face of adversity, this podcast will empower you to embrace the notion that every moment holds a choice, and it's up to us to seize it. Join me as we engage in insightful conversations with thought leaders, experts, and everyday people who have harnessed the power of choice to achieve greatness, overcome obstacles, and create extraordinary lives. If you feel inspired by this episode, please rate it and consider subscribing. I'm keen to know how it's impacted you.
Okay, so we are walking around Macritchie Reservoir in Singapore. It's a beautiful morning. Sun hasn't even really risen yet.
No, not yet, no.
It's just after 6 a.m. Looking out at a nice lake here at the reservoir. And I'm with Tom Platts.
Hello, how are you doing?
Doing well. So Tom, what are we doing out here?
Well, that's a good question. This year I've undertaken to do a challenge for myself and to raise money and awareness for dementia in Singapore and dementia globally by walking or running around Macritchie Reservoir here in Singapore as many times as possible. And it's sort of all grown very organically. Nothing was planned. And I can tell you the story if you're interested to hear more about how it sort of all kicked off. But the total number of laps that I'm now looking to do this year is 365. So I'll do one a day, which equates to about 4,400 kilometers here in Macritchie. Well, there are some tweaks around the edges around it because I travel a little bit. And as you know, I'm flying off today to Europe.
Yeah.
But I can tell you more about that. But that's the plan. And so it's really just to raise awareness and to raise funds, if appropriate, for the charity and all the good work that Dementia Singapore does here for people living with dementia.
That's fantastic. So we're walking around the reservoir right now. We hear it's very quiet. There's a few other walkers out here.
Yeah.
And, you said you're doing such a long distance, and this loop itself is around 11 kilometers.
It's a bit more
give
than
or
that.
take.
Yeah, it's a bit more than that. It depends on which way you go and how much time people have in the morning. Because I should say the other thing I do is I'm taking people out with me whilst I'm going. And it's all in the spirit of also connecting, reconnecting, and meeting new people here in Singapore. And again, I can tell you a bit about the sort of numbers because I'm a bit of a stato, and I've started started really recording an awful lot of numbers and data. But it's actually, if you go the slightly shorter way, which I suspect we may well do today, it's 11.7 kilometers. And if you go the slightly longer way, again, depending on the GPS and the satellites, it's about 12.5 kilometers, which is how it adds up to about 4,500 kilometers in total. Yeah.
So 4,500 kilometers. Tom, I actually looked it up, and if we walked from here to India, that's how much it would be.
That's not bad. Yeah, I know. Well, there you go. And as I say, I hadn't really planned, but that's how it's all developed. I've got through 7 pairs of trainers throughout the year so far. So
okay.
Nike's been doing very well for me, but I'm not sure we're allowed to necessarily brand people, but they've done very well for me.
Okay, so let's rewind. Let's rewind here because we're walking, but let's think about this. Okay, so
I can probably turn the torch off now as well, can't I?
the sun is just barely starting to come up here. So, okay, so Tom, you said you started this, and now you're going to do 365 laps. What was the thing that made you start?
So, I've lived in Singapore for 13 years, and for 11 of those years, I was with my family. And now they've returned to the UK, and I miss them dearly. And it's quite hard because I fly back and forth. And there are various reasons why that's happened, and they've gone back to the UK. But it's been quite tough. And, it's tough for the family as well. But there are people out here like me who unfortunately are having to do this because of a variety of different reasons. But actually, one of the things that I do when I'm taking people around is to tell them all a bit about my story and my why I'm doing this and some of the things that have come up as a result of it. And you find that being more open with people about the reasons and that sort of thing for doing it, you end up gaining more interest from people generally, and people themselves open up quite a lot too. Hello, hi Mr. Chong.
Hi.
There you go.
Bye bye.
So I said to you, there's yes, doing one today. Yep, yep. So I said to you,
we meet people along the way.
That's right. So there's a bit of a community here in Macritchie, and Mr. Chong and I have now known each other since loop probably number 3. But I didn't know that he was called Mr. Chong until loop 220. So about 55 loops ago, we became firm friends. And now we can't say very much other than, hello, Mr. Chong. So it's got legs, this relationship. It's a bit of a slow burn, but I suspect we're going to be friends for life. But him and his 4 colleagues come around every morning. We see each other at about the same place every time. Anyway, so look, they've been back in the UK. And as you know, I'm flying back there today. I'm really excited to go to see them. And we've got dementia in the extended family. So, and historically, we have had dementia in the family too. And this is a message to them. We're just going up some steps now. So if we lose our breath a little bit, although the fitness has got a lot better, it might be a bit breathy. But this is really a message to them to, to try to help in any which way I can to raise awareness for people living with dementia and also to raise funds as well. And I've now got to know the board and the charity at Dementia Singapore very well, and all the fine stuff that they do here for people living with dementia, and become firm friends with them.
Yeah.
And so, as a result of traveling an awful lot last year with all this, I put my head in the sand a bit in 2022. I also broke my shoulder skateboarding. That's not what somebody does at 43 years old, but I did. And so it meant that everything was a little bit dismal and a little bit difficult. So I thought that in 2023, I'd do something which was a bit more meaningful and which tried to bring into the world, into my world, a number of things to try to give it a bit of zhuzh and to really pep it up a bit. And that's what this has all developed from. It was not planned. A client of mine said to me on January the 7th, a client called Mike, let's go and do something together. I need to have a chat with you about a few things. So I said, okay, let's do it. And he suggested a beer. I said to him, that's a good idea. And then I thought, come on, that's not the right thing to do with this new January resolution to be a bit more into community life here in Singapore and meeting more people. And so I thought, no, come on, bring him back and say, let's go and do some exercise instead. And I used to do Macritchie with a couple of other people quite regularly last year. And it was a really nice way to do 20,000 steps or something before work. You'd invariably be in the office before everybody else.
Yeah.
And you'd have had 2.5 hours of chat and chewing the cud over, whatever it might be. So it was always a nice thing to do. So he said, that's a good idea. I then rang him back a bit later and said, I'll tell you what, you said you were going to take me out for beer, or we were going to go out for beer. You asked me. So I'll take that as you were going to be buying the beer. And now that we're not buying the beer, why don't we give the money that you think you would have spent, so the equivalent of the value that you would have spent on beer, give it to me, and I'll give it to my firm's charity of the year in Singapore.
Yeah.
And the firm here in Singapore has a variety of its own charities, and globally we have charities as well. So he said, well, that's an unusual request, but yeah, let's do that, okay. So we did the loop. We had a really nice chat. We saw a snake or 2.
Yep.
And in fact, we saw a blue Malayan coral snake, and I'll tell you a bit more about the animals I see here later. And put the world to right, and it was really nice. And I could feel something germinating in my head that this was something that was fun. It had direction.
Yep.
And it really had a potential opportunity. And it was obviously healthy, and in the spirit of mental well-being and healthiness, let's say, both mind and body. It was something that I thought would be a nice thing to perhaps do again. So I did it a few more times with other people. And I was probably sitting on about $400 or $500 by the middle of January. And I'd done maybe, 4 or 5 loops. So it was a pretty early, slow start and nothing planned, as I say. I then spoke to our lady in the office who looks after the charities for Singapore and said, who is our charity, actually? Because I'm now sitting on a bit of money, which come the end of January, I'll probably end up spending on beer because I haven't been able to do it in January because it's a dry month. That sounds like I'm an alcoholic. I'm not. But that, I suspect, would have happened. So she said, actually, we're coming to the end of a term with a charity. We do 2-year cycles. And so I thought, well, look, it feels like a really good idea to do something to raise awareness for dementia, given our family circumstances. And I won't go into names and stuff, but they know who they are.
Yeah.
So that was really how it all kicked off. And so I spoke to the charity here, Dementia Singapore, and they have to give you permission to set up a fundraising link page, the Just Giving page. Mm-hmm. And I think they were equally as flummoxed as to what I was going to be doing. Some crazy expat going to do something in Macritchie, but wasn't entirely sure what it was going to be. And to be fair, I wasn't entirely sure either what it was going to be. So it was all a bit sort of suck it and see, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And so that's how it all developed. I then put it onto LinkedIn and onto Facebook. I'm a bit too old for Instagram, or at least I don't really understand it. I probably should do. And I said to people, look, I'm going to do 75 laps of Macritchie this year. People can come if they want to. They don't have to. People can sponsor me if they'd like to. And the money's going to go to Dementia Singapore. Mm-hmm. But it's not compulsory. It's all very, very low key. But it's just an opportunity for me to meet with people again, to connect with people again, and just to catch up, really. That was the initial plan.
Yeah.
And if I did 75 laps or loops of Macritchie, that would be about 1,000 kilometres, and that would be brilliant. And the plan was then to sort of raise $5,000 for Dementia Singapore. So I put it onto LinkedIn and Facebook.
Yeah.
And I sort of didn't think very much more, but I started getting a bit of traction, and WhatsApps here and LinkedIn messages there and whatever, such that by the third day after posting it, I'd got the next 6 weeks booked out twice a day. Mm-hmm. And it was obviously going a bit viral, and I've never had anything like that or experienced anything like that before. And I was a bit humbled. I was a bit worried, logistically, a bit, oh my gosh, how am I going to do 2 laps of Macritchie Reservoir every day for the next 6 weeks? Can you see the lizard coming up here?
Yeah.
That's lizard number 301.
Oh, and what's that bird there?
And that's a heron. Oh, that's nice, isn't it?
There's a heron?
That's a heron. So there are 2 herons that live around the corner here.
Oh,
there she goes. There she goes. Just flying over the lake. And then that there, as I say, that's lizard number 301. Don't let me forget to tell you about the animals, okay? Because I'm sure
we'll talk about the animals in a bit.
Of course. So anyway, look, it sort of it really picked up, and we had all of these days booked out. And so what I tried to do actually at that stage was I'd have to be here at 5 o'clock in the morning. So we did the first loop almost entirely in the dark with a torch. And then the second loop we'd started about 7. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just sort of took off. And so I started putting together groups of people that I thought might be interested. So as I say, I'm a lawyer. So I did International Deal Day. So I had a lawyer, an underwriter, a broker, a corporate finance guy, a bank, a target, a shareholder, investor, all that sort of stuff. I had Offshore Lawyers Day. I had Cybersecurity Day. I did Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Day, where I tried to be as diverse as I possibly could be for a middle-aged, white, senior, legal professional. Mm-hmm. So not as diverse as I could be, but trying my best. And so we did all these different events and days, and it really took off. And that's just a slice of them. And actually, more recently, I've been asked by quite a few companies, so 7 actually so far, to do their corporate social responsibility mornings. So I'll be here at sort of 6:30 in the morning, and I'll take out a bunch of folk from various different businesses. So I've done some of the banks, I've done some of the private equity houses, a couple of PR companies, etc. Mm-hmm. And they'll do a loop with me. I'll talk to them about this, what it's about, the sort of mental wellness, well-being type thing, and the animals that we see. Mm-hmm. And then they'll go off and do whatever they do, and I'll go to the office. But it's been quite a nice thing. So that's obviously boosted the numbers of people I've met, even though some of them have been sort of press-ganged into it by their bosses. But I think most of them have really enjoyed it, and it's been a very enjoyable experience. So that's what's really happened, and that's how it's all developed into what it is. Mm-hmm. What do people think of it? Well, I think they take it for what it is, and it's a very innocent project, and it's not something that, as I say, as you can hear, has been deliberately, logistically developed over time, sort of organised. It's come about as it goes. And you and I have spoken for some time anyway. Mm-hmm. You know that I set up all sorts of ridiculous rules, regulations, and everything that's sort of trying to be fun about how this goes. Yeah. The only thing I will say is that it has been a logistical nightmare I've got 3 spreadsheets going at any one time, and it has gone really quite busy recently up here. And so I've just been trying to figure out who goes where, who goes what. Obviously with flying, etc., it becomes quite challenging as well. But it's good, and so I'm now fully booked out until December the 17th, which is quite crazy. And I've got groups through till then, and that's great.
So tell us, you mentioned these hats we're wearing.
Yeah.
These are like trucker hats that
Yeah.
say Macritchie Challenge.
Yeah.
You mentioned the rules to
Yeah.
who gets these hats. What are the rules?
Okay, so again, as I said, I sort of make these things up as I'm going along. But one of the things I thought I'd do, because I didn't have any merch previously, before I went back to the UK, and I had to go back to the UK for an extended period of time in April for family reasons. And so I thought, well, I'd try to do something to maybe raise awareness of what I'm doing in the UK and in the States, obviously, as well.
Yeah.
And look at the sunrise, isn't it beautiful?
Yeah.
Every day it's different here. That's what's so beautiful about it. Every day you see a different type of sky, the water slightly more choppy or flatter. It's like glass, isn't it? So.
Yeah, so we're stopped here looking over the reservoir. I see something.
And that's another lizard.
Another lizard.
Yeah. So that's 302.
So these are monitor lizards. These are not lizards like we have in the US. These are almost Komodo dragon.
Yeah,
like think Komodo dragon in your mind.
Exactly. So look, what I thought was I'd get some merchandise and I'd make some hats, and they are deliberately trucker hats, very bright and pretty cheap looking. But I've probably had 250 made now, and people have started to ask about them. So I set up what I thought would be quite clever, would be some rules, so try to attract more people to come. And there's the other heron there.
Oh yeah.
See its head sticking out?
It's a nice heron.
So there are, as a lawyer, laws and rules, as you know, are what I love, right? Apparently. So there are 6 laws and 1 rule. And the laws and the rules have direct and indirect effects, a little bit like EU competition law, which I learnt about when I was a trainee solicitor. But the laws are as follows. Law number 1, it's my party. I can have any hat I want at any time. Law number 2, the 3 people that I mentioned that I used to do Macritchie with regularly last year, and including the chap that I first did with this, are called Mike, Will and Faye. And Will particularly thinks I commercialised what we did last year a lot, but I think in a very good spirits, it's fun. And he's really bought into it, and I really appreciate his friendship and support, as do I with Mike and particularly Faye as well. But so I consider them to be the founders of this. Now they aren't, and they would heavily dispute the fact that they are founders, but I do it because it hedges my liability in case this goes wrong and I look like an idiot. So I can at least try and put some of the blame their way by saying they were the founders. They aren't, and they have nothing to do with it. However, I like to think it's a sort of a little joke around that. And so law 2, they have a hat whenever they want as well. Law 3, anybody who lives in Singapore and does it 3 times with me will receive their cap. And that's the gold standard. So people should be looking, in my eyes, to earn their cap under Law 3. So you earned your hat for a different reason, we'll come to, but you've now done this will be your 2nd time.
Yeah.
So you need to come back before January the 13th, which is when this all ends, this whole show, and you will earn your cap properly under Law 3 on that occasion. And I'll tell you a bit more about that why soon. So Law 4, anybody who flies into Singapore and does it from another country. So earlier in the week, I had somebody who came in from Jordan. So we're just bending over and about to go through a lot of water here. So you okay?
Yeah.
So Law 4, I had somebody in from Jordan earlier this week. So I had not had anyone from Jordan previously.
Oh, wow.
But I've now had people coming in from 31 different countries and doing it, which is really cool. So America, Australia, Russia, Ukraine, Botswana, South Africa, Canada, England, obviously, New Zealand, Dubai, Jordan. It's been really cool. And I've had pictures of people after they've been wearing their hats in their offices or wherever it might be in those different countries. People have sent them to me. And I had a really lovely message not so long ago from a very good friend of mine in New York who wasn't able to do the Macritchie Big Apple edition with me when I was there at the end of March. And he said, "Oh, mate, hi. I've just run around Central Park. I did 13.1 miles. I did a half marathon. Does that qualify me for a Macritchie?" And I said, you don't really understand the rules, but that's absolutely fine. So I'll send you a cap anyway as a well done. So he sent me a photograph, so I put it in the post to him in New York. And he sent me a picture from his office wearing his Macritchie Challenge hat, which is really lovely to see. It's really quite heartwarming, you can see. So law 5, anybody under the age of 18. So I've taken 5 families with their, or mums and dads with their daughters or sons. And obviously my daughters have done it too as well. And Connie, my older daughter, actually did lap 200 with me, which was a really special moment, and I loved that. So they've got their hats too. So I've had 8 kids under the age of 18. So then we get to the best one of the lot, which is rule 6. Now, why it's a rule, why not? There's no particular reason, but this is how you won your cap the first time.
Okay.
You were given a cap through rule 6, and I call that the randoms rule. Okay. I don't mean to say that you're random, which has sort of connotations about it, but it just means I've never met you before. And I think you contacted me through, how did we get together first time round?
It was through one of my friends who had gone around with you.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we'd not met, but you said, hey, I've seen what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so I said, oh, great, let's do it. So I've had come out so far now, of the 497 people who have come out with me so far, 283 of them are people I've never met before. And that's what this whole thing's about. So it's a really cool fact, and I'm really proud of that, actually more than anything else. And pride isn't a word that I like to use that much, but obviously it's just something that's really sort of humbling. And because of the fact that this has sort of developed so much over time, it's just a really nice thing to be able to say. I also mentioned earlier, obviously, that I've done quite a few of these corporate days. So in that number, as I mentioned, there's quite a few people who I probably won't ever meet again, you know, who came out because they were being sort of press ganged into it by their bosses. But I think that they all came away with a happy face and having had an enjoyable experience. And a lot of people, particularly Singaporean people, they've not actually ever done a whole loop of Macritchie, and many haven't been here for 10, 20 years. So for them to come back, they've really enjoyed it. And I've actually seen an uptick in people here just because I think they've heard about this, or they're doing it, and they're doing it because they've done it. Quite a few people now, actually. It's quite interesting to see. But of that number, the 280, whatever it is, there's 175 people who've actually written to me directly, like you, who are much closer random connections, if you know what I mean, because they've actually expressed an interest to meet or to hear more about the challenge, or because they've got dementia in their family, or just because they're interested generally in coming to Macritchie and do some exercise. Yeah. And that, to me, is what's the best bit of the whole thing. So I've effectively made 175 new friends. Yeah. Some will be great friends, some less so, but that's how it's all come about. And they've texted me, LinkedIn to me, emailed me, phoned me, whatever it might be. And that really, to me, is the sort of crux of this whole thing from a personal perspective. And obviously the charity element and the fundraising and awareness is the key bit behind it. But personally, that's what this is about. Yeah. And of course, a lot of people say to me, oh, well, it's a great business development tool as well. And of course, there are side effects which have been helpful and good, and I could tell you more about that. But I won't, because it's not actually about the firm at all. It's really about me. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. It's my thing. And I'm very happy to share it. I'm also really happy for people to maybe do it elsewhere, because it has taken off. And I know that some people have expressed an interest in maybe taking this forward next year when I sort of retire it, so to speak. And I'd be delighted if they did, because it is a logistical effort. It gives you a great regime. I know what I'm doing at 5:30 every morning and preparing for it the night before, etc. But it has been a wonderful thing. The last thing about the hats, there's law 7. So law 7 is the catch-all veto right. I can give a hat to anybody I want at any time. Sure. So reality is I give them to pretty much everybody. You have to be pretty unlucky if you don't get one, and that's usually because I've run out of them at home. Oh. But I've got another batch in now. So for anybody who wants to come, so do come, because I can give you a hat now. But so law 7 does that. The only new addition to the laws which came up last week is that I consider anybody who has got their hat through law 7 to have an asterisk by their name. So if you'd won your hat through law 7, as opposed to random rule 6, I would always think of you as, what number are you? About 250, let's say, something like that. Yeah. I'd always have thought of you as Erica, 250, asterisk. And in my eyes, right? Yeah. You don't care, but I'm just saying it. So what the asterisk is meant to do is it's meant to tempt you to come back so that you do it 3 times. You actually win your hat properly under Law 3 so that I can finally remove the asterisk from your name. So it's really just a joke to say, come back and have another go. And that's gone down quite well, actually.
When you said you were raising money, what are you up to now?
So the target, I think you asked me, originally the target I was looking to raise was $5,000. That's been a bit of a movable feast. It then went to, I think, $15,000. And last week, in fact, yesterday, I went over $55,000.
Wow.
So I'm really proud of it. And I've had some very generous donors. The charity has obviously got really behind it, and they've been very good about publicising it and also coming and taking part. And as I said to you, I took 47 people. That's my largest group so far now.
Yeah.
47 people around Macritchie 10 days ago. And there were 15 people living with dementia in that group, and they had their primary carers with them.
Right.
And there were people from the board. I took my trainee from the office who helped me with producing a little quiz and questionnaire that the people could do whilst they were going. So they had a little bit of focus in the walk, which was nice. And so I gave them a little bit of a quiz on the animals that I'd seen, and then they were spotting things as they were going. They did a short 5K loop rather than the whole thing. And I took the tallest man I know in Singapore as well out for that one, so so that he could act as a bit of a beacon for them to follow. That was really nice. But so 55,000 is the number I've got to, and sort of I'm going towards 75. If I get to 100, that would be amazing. And that's certainly behind the scenes. That's my target. And as I say, the behind the scenes target for number of loops is 365.
And that would all go to Dementia Singapore.
That's right, yeah.
Which is a pretty small organization, I imagine, or?
Yes, it's government funded here.
Yeah.
Most of the charities are, but it's professionally run. But it supports dementia patients and dementia care here in Singapore. And I've made some incredibly tight friendships out of that. So Cindy, Jason, Paul Heng, Bernard, Roger, who am I missing? They all know who they are.
Yeah.
And it's been really quite wonderful, actually. Sherwin, sorry. But they really are an impressive bunch. And I just think the world of them, actually. And so, yes, I've had the opportunity to do things with them, go to various events for them, speak at various things with them.
Yeah.
And it's been very nice. So in Singapore, there are about 125,000 people living with dementia. A lot of your listeners will know or have experience of dementia in their families or however it may be. But you call people who have dementia, you say that they are living with dementia. You don't sort of say it's a disease. They don't suffer from dementia because of the stigma that's attached to that.
Right.
So they're people who are living with dementia, and they obviously have their carers. And I've learned all of this through my talking to the people at DSG, at Dementia Singapore, and just reading up about it and learning more. But of course, with every one person living with dementia, there's family and there are carers.
That's right.
So let's say, on average, that might be 4 people relatively closely knit. That here in Singapore is nearly 500,000 people who've got it somehow connected to them. And I suspect that number's bigger. But of a population of about 6.5 million, or whatever we are here, that's a huge number.
Yeah.
Oh, there's 2 monkeys. Do you see them?
Yeah.
Okay.
2 small monkeys walking up ahead.
Actually,
the monkeys are a little bit of a... I'm not too happy to see the monkeys.
I know.
Here.
Last week I had a Danish chap in who's come and done it 3 times with me. A monkey saw him opening up a breakfast bar as he was going along, and it jumped down the tree, jumped up his arm and took it out of his hand.
Oh, no.
So you've got to be a bit careful, for sure. You don't like it when they hiss at you.
Yeah.
So globally, there are 55 million people who are registered as living with dementia or a form of Alzheimer's. So again, if you multiply that by, say, 4, you're at 250 million people who's affected by it.
Yeah.
So it's a huge issue, as you can tell. So I've had the opportunity to go to the New Horizons centres here in Singapore and meet with the direct carers and the nurses at the centres, which has been really wonderful and very humbling. And the work they do is fantastic. And I don't want to sound glib about it, but they really do an amazing job in challenging circumstances.
Yeah.
And they have different sort of levels of people who are living with dementia, from very early onset dementia and early stage to quite late stage living there.
So have you ever done anything like this before, Tom?
No. I used to run marathons quite a lot as a kid.
Okay.
So I've always been very into the outdoors. I've come from the countryside effectively in the UK. I've lived up in the Lake District for a long period of time as well, on and off with my parents up there. And so I've always loved the countryside. So I ran a few marathons and things, and I once did it for Shelter back in 2005. Gosh, that was a long time ago. But I've never done anything with such purpose and such longevity, and also the whole fundraising thing like this. So it's really developed, and I've just been making it up as I'm going along in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like that, but maybe that's how these things start.
Yeah.
You know, you never know.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked a little bit about the animals. We've seen some monkeys. We saw a lizard, a heron. Okay. You had mentioned even a blue Malayan coral snake that you once saw.
Okay.
So what's going on with the animals?
What's going on with the animals? So 20% of the time when I'm here, I do it with a couple of runners coming past us now. Morning. Morning. Or maybe 15% of the time I do it on my own. So I don't stop just because I don't have people to go with me. Yeah. But 85% of the time, obviously, I do it with people. And I love doing it with people. That's what the whole thing's about. But actually, I do sometimes quite like doing it on my own as well, so I can have time to think or listen to a podcast or just listen to the sounds of the jungle. It's lovely too. And obviously just seeing the sunrise, it's so spiritual, it's wonderful. Yeah. But as a result of coming out here so much, and particularly when you're on your own, you see an awful lot of animals. So I was actually recording the information I was seeing in one of my various spreadsheets of the sort of animals that I was seeing. And I thought, well, it would be a good idea to maybe be a bit more formal. So I wrote to NParks here in Singapore, which is equivalent of national parks or national trust or whatever it may be in your various countries that your listeners are in, and said, hey, look, I'm here basically every day at the same time. I'm taking note of the fauna and the wildlife that I see. Would you like to have it as effectively as an audit of the park over the year? Yeah. And they said, yes, that'd be great. So I send them a list every month. I suspect it goes straight into their trash can now, but, you know, I've given them so much of it. But for me, it also gives me a bit of direction, and I quite like it. So I deal with it at the end of every week. So I've set up in my head, and everybody now knows about it, what I call the Macritchie Big Five. And the Macritchie Big Five is meant to emulate, obviously, the Safari Big Five that you'll all be aware of. Mm-hmm. But the Macritchie Big Five constitutes the colugo, which is effectively a flying fox, and it glides between the trees, sort of bat-like. And as I said at the beginning of this earlier today, before we started recording, there are two that live right at the very start of the loop that we're on today, and they've just had a little baby. Yep. So I've just shown you the picture of the baby, and maybe you can put it onto the webpage. But it's very, very pretty. You tend to see them at dusk or dawn, and they're sort of nocturnal. You don't see them that often. Lizards, I've said, the monitor lizards, which you described earlier, I've seen 302 of those now. I suspect quite a few of them are the same ones, but there are lots of them in Singapore generally, but 302 of those. Monkeys, it's much rarer not to see monkeys, and there you go, we've just seen some monkeys. Yep. So actually, I've only ever not seen monkeys on 3 occasions. And one of my friends that I've just made, is part of that 283 number I gave you earlier, when he came out, on the first 2 occasions, we saw nothing, no animals at all. Didn't even see monkeys. So he would say, oh, mate, this is rubbish. There aren't any animals here. I don't believe it. So actually, on his third lap, we saw monkeys, and he was awarded his cap. So it was high fives all around at the end of it, because he was able to see his monkeys. When we get to the more interesting things, wild boar is the fourth of the Macritchie Big Five, and I've seen 55 wild boar. Wow. Ranging from very, very baby ones to little baby ones to very big adult male wild boar. And I've actually been in a group of 10 where they just walk straight out. So there were 3 mamas and 7 babies. Wow. And that was quite scary, actually. Yeah. So there were 2 of us walking around, and we saw the wild boar, and they came out, danged around us. So that wasn't ideal. Yeah. We just sort of stopped and waited for them to move on, but 10 of them at the same time. I've seen all sorts of other stuff as well as the Macritchie Big Five. I've seen something which is equivalent to a sort of Galapagos tortoise, huge, very, very big. And it clearly shouldn't have been here, but has been released into the wild by somebody, I suspect. I've seen a scorpion. I've seen a critically endangered buffy fish owl. I've seen stingrays. I've seen very large soft-shell snapping turtles. I told you about the 3 sea eagles that were out yesterday that were playing around. It was lovely. I've seen all sorts. It's been wonderful. Oh, sorry. Then you've got the snake. Sorry, that's the best one. Yeah. And so snakes are what people really are interested in. I've seen all sorts of snakes. Some I've no idea what they are, but it's rare that we don't see snakes, to be honest with you, nowadays. There are a lot. And I know a lot of people will think, oh, that's grim. But I'm never quite sure if I'm 99% scared 1% excited
Yeah.
or the other way round. Of the ones that you'd be interested in, I've seen 2 waggler pit vipers, which are fluorescent yellow or green, like your hat.
Yep. Wow.
They've got a triangular head, and they are pretty venomous. You wouldn't want to get nipped by one of those. I've seen 3 python in the trees.
In the trees?
In the trees, so wrapped up around the trees. Morning. Hiya. So that chap runs it every morning. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah. I've seen 3 king cobras, so 2 king cobras in the trees, wrapped up, and 1 about 10, 12 meters ahead of me crossing the path. And it sensed me, obviously, before I saw it, and it started to raise its head. So I gave it a very wide berth for 15 minutes and let it slither on and went nowhere near it, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I've also seen 7 black spitting cobras, which are equally not very nice people to know, and would have a good crack at you if they could. And they're, highly venomous. But the best one is, as I mentioned earlier, the blue Malayan coral snake. Now, if you look that up on Google, there are all sorts of things about them. They're about 1.5 meters long.
Yep.
They're black with an electric blue stripe down the middle of it and an orange tip and an orange head. I've seen 7 of these things. They're also called the 100-pace snake. So if you get bitten by one of those, you've got 100 paces before you die.
Wow.
There's no anti-venom for them. They're the 2nd most toxic snake in Asia. They've got the largest venom glands of any snake in the world. And they're also known as the killer's killer because they hunt cobras and kill cobras.
Wow, other snakes, yeah.
Yeah, but they kill the cobras. So they're the snakes I've seen. Above that, I've set up what I've called the king of the jungle. And I mentioned that I had Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Day. Do you remember I said that? We did it. And I thought I'd done pretty well, actually, in terms of DE&I. Until I said, and then we get to the king of the jungle, at which point someone on that group said to me, do you mean the queen? And I was like, oh, gosh. Of all the things that I thought I could be undiverse and equitable and inclusive about, I didn't think it was going to be about a pangolin. I tried so hard. Anyway, the pangolin is obviously very, very rare, and it's globally highly critically endangered. And I don't know if you saw last week that in Nigeria, the authorities burnt 1.5 tons of pangolin scales because they were going to be used for traditional Chinese medicine and shipped between Vietnam and China.
So these are smuggled.
They're smuggled, exactly. And so it's terribly sad. There are only 1,030 pangolin left in Singapore, according to a report about 2 months ago. And I've seen 2. So I saw one about 5 meters into the jungle going away from me some time ago. And then about 6 weeks ago, I had some folk in from Finland, so one of the 31 countries that I had, and they were in town for a conference, and somebody said, could you take them out and do your Macritchie with them? And I said, absolutely. Well, as I was talking to them about the animals, very oddly, I had a little rustling to my left. I get to see and know where things are going to be, just because I've been here so many times, so you can tell. And I said, it was a little rustling. I thought, I wonder, that might be a mouse deer, which is one of these very small deers. And it wasn't, it was pangolin. It just sauntered alongside us and then decided to walk straight out in front of us, sniffed around, had a look, and just walked straight across us if we weren't there. It was really quite remarkable.
Wow.
It was wonderful, actually. Totally majestic. And again, I'll send you the video of that if you're keen to see it, but it really is extraordinary. So that's the pangolin. And then above that, I've got the emperor or the empress of the jungle, which is the samba deer. And the samba deer, there are 40 of them left in Singapore. And so they're incredibly rare. And I've seen 2 of them up here. And I suspect, because they're so rare, I've probably seen the same one twice, actually, again. And they're like little horses. They're big, and it just ran across me from nowhere, and I had no idea. So that's the animals. That's what it's all about. And the whole thing comes to an end on January the 13th. I will continue to do this because it's been wonderful for so many reasons, I hope you can tell. And I've got so much out of it. But it has to come to an end at some stage. At least the formal bit of it has to come to an end. So January the 13th will be the last day, which is the nearest Saturday to the day I started on in this year. And I'll do 3 laps that day. The first lap I'll do on my own to say goodbye to the challenge. And actually every time I say that, I get a little bit emotional about it and just think, gosh, it's been such a big thing of my life this year. So I'll probably go around that miserable as sin, crying my eyes out and listening to Morrissey. Lap 2 is already organised. I'm going to take out the founders, so Mike, Faye and Will. And then lap 3, it's a come one, come all. So that, Erica, if you don't do it beforehand, is the perfect opportunity for you to take that asterisk off your name. Albeit you don't have an asterisk.
I don't have an asterisk.
Well, yeah,
I'm Rule 6, right?
You are Rule 6, but now I consider you to be a friend, so I'm going to I'm making a new rule. Okay. Rule 8, Law 8. Anybody who's got it under Law 6 but could have had it under Law 7 now has to get the asterisk and therefore has to take it off. So there you go, you've got to come back. So January the 13th, and come one, come all. We'll probably start at about midday. I've just got to work it out, the details. But we'll all go round. I reckon there'll be about 100 people there, hopefully, and we'll all go round, and then we'll end it by walking to the Polo Club, which is just down the road from here, and have a barbecue and party to raise a bit more funds for the charity.
Lovely.
So there you go. And so most times we do this lap, I'll tell people most of what I've just explained to you.
Yeah.
And as I said at the beginning, the more open I am about things, the more open other people have become. There's a sort of omerta here. So what's said in Macritchie stays in Macritchie completely. So I've obviously been privy to a huge amount of news, gossip, all that sort of stuff. But it has been a wonderful experience, and all that stuff stays here, but it's been brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, have you found people wanted to come out here for any specific reason beyond just being a part of the charity mission? I mean, is there like a cathartic thing to coming out here and kind of talking about things?
I think so. I mean, I am no counsellor. I'm no therapist. I don't profess to do any of those sorts of things, but I'm a reasonably good listener.
Yeah.
And I've heard an awful lot of stuff from people, and for what it's worth, given my views on stuff, I'm no saint. I've done things that I'm not necessarily proud of in my life, but at the same time, I try my best. And every day, I suppose one tries their best to do things the right way. And so at least I can give a little bit of experience and help out if necessary. But people do come and they do talk about stuff. I've met some really lovely people, and actually some people now that I will consider to be very close friends.
Yeah. And
people that actually, oddly, I'd sort of targeted previously as being somebody that I should know. Because one, they work in my industry, they're about the same age as me, whatever it might be. And they'd written to me, a couple of them have written, or more than a couple, have written to me and said, hey, I've seen what you're doing. We should know each other. It's funny that we don't.
Yeah.
I've actually got dementia in my family, my sister, my brother, whatever it might be. And I'd like to come and meet you and just talk. And I actually count a number of people now amongst some quite close friends as a result of that. So I do my best. As I say, I'm no counsellor or therapist, but certainly I think people do come, and they are much keener to open up once they've heard me talk to them about what it's all about, really.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah, I think so. But it's been a journey, right?
Yeah.
In so many ways. I've learned so much about the charity, dementia, people living with dementia and issues around that. I've learned so much about the jungle. I've learned so much about wildlife. Incidentally, people often ask me, how do I know about what all the animals are that I see? As I say, I'm slightly fascinated by snakes, but slightly terrified by them.
Yeah.
But there's also a Facebook page which I regularly post on called Singapore Wildlife Sightings. And so if I don't know something, I'll shove it on that, and someone will say, oh, that's a buffy fish owl, or whatever it might be, exactly. And so that's really quite helpful. And I've also learned an awful lot about me and myself, and areas where, just because I have so much time to think about stuff, and just areas of consistent, trying to work things out and get things right, because it's not always easy. We all live in stressful, long working lives. We all have our own personal things we have to deal with, and it's been a really good way of just trying to sort of compartmentalize and deal with some of those things, and it's not always easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They say that walking clears your brain, and that you're able to think through things much more clearly. And I'm a huge fan of Friedrich Nietzsche.
Of what, sorry?
Friedrich Nietzsche, the existentialist philosopher.
Yeah.
And he always said, every good thought comes from walking.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so true. You can really think through things when you're moving rather than being stationary. I think we're going back to one of the first reasons you started, is kind of thinking through things, being more healthy, not drinking.
Yep, absolutely. Like, and if I'd stopped drinking altogether, I'd have lost even more weight than I have done. But there are health benefits of it. I've lost 7 or 8 kilograms this year, which is great.
Of course.
And it just gives you this new sort of goal. But absolutely, walking it's really great for, just as I used to find running used to be as a younger chap. I'd go out, you clear your brain. It's a well-known thing. The endorphins start pumping, and you you just clear your head, but you get also quite clarity of thinking. And here too, exactly the same, for sure. It's been brilliant for exactly that reason. And actually talking to people as well just gives you other new insights into things that you wouldn't necessarily have heard. I've heard so many interesting people. I've heard so many things that you would have no idea about. You know, behind closed doors is one of those phrases that people talk a bit about, but actually you realise that your life isn't necessarily as bad as it sometimes might feel, because other people are going through the same thing. And I'm not saying that my life is bad. I'm not saying I'm an alcoholic in any way. You know, none of those things. But we all have our own issues that we need to deal with. And actually, it's quite nice to then be backed up by the fact that other people are also experiencing similar sorts of things that you wouldn't necessarily always think.
They say you never know. You know, you never know what someone's going through just by looking at them on the surface, especially when you're working, you know, you're working in law, you're working downtown in Singapore, you've got a lot of people walking around looking very put together.
Exactly.
Say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's pretty, isn't it?
I know. It's so nice and calm. It's hard for most people to imagine, I think, who live here. You know, I mean, most of us, we're living in high-rise condos or we're going to Orchard Road or Dempsey or something like that. It's all very nice, manicured, put together.
That's right, exactly.
But it's a wild place out here, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's one of the reasons, actually. That's quite a nice segue. That's one of the reasons why people want to come on it when they come into Singapore. So obviously, I don't know everybody comes into Singapore, but quite often, if I know people are coming in, either from my office or clients or whatever it is, I'll say, listen, rather than go for that coffee or that lunch, come here.
Yeah.
And they normally think, he's mad, what's he talking about? And at that time, no thanks. But the reality is most of them come and do it. And they get to see a side of Singapore they would never experience otherwise, because they come to the hotel, they come to the restaurant, and they come to the offices.
Yeah.
That's it. And they're here for 3-4 days, whatever it might be, before flying home or to Hong Kong or whatever it might be. But they don't get to see this. And this really is the real Singapore. You know, this is the jungle. This is what it was all about. And I have to say, I absolutely love it for exactly that reason.
Yeah, it's lovely.
We're just going up some more steps. So what I do, I think you know, is during every loop, I take a whole bunch of photographs. And at the end of every loop, I then do a Photoshop job on it, make me look good and don't care about anybody else, of course. And then I send you around the official photo of that loop.
Yep.
So I've got a big folder of 276 photos and various other footage and stuff. And at the end of the year, I've already got somebody lined up now to make a little montage stroke documentary type thing.
Yeah.
Because it's been, again, I don't want to look like an idiot, but I am very proud of it. And it has taken an awful lot of time, effort, and steps to do this. And I'd like to remember it because of all the things, the good and positive things that have come from it. So at the end of the year, I'll release it, and we'll do a party again at our offices here in Singapore. I may well do it in our offices in London as well, and then try to raise a little bit more money. But everybody who's been on a loop with me will feature in the video. So this was where I was when I saw the 10 wild boar. They were just here. They all just crossed across here and then came straight into us.
And we're here walking, we're at like kilometer 8, apparently.
Yeah.
According to the sign, through the woods. It's such a nice, it feels so cool in here too, because Singapore is normally so hot.
Yes, exactly. And so under the canopy, it really does, it also gets very humid as well because of the canopy. So it's a mix of both, really. No, it's been good. Morning. Hi.
Morning.
So it's quite a tricky run here because we do it, I'd probably run it, as I said, about 30%, but it's quite tricky because underfoot it's, you know, there's a whole bunch of bricks here that are here, and then there's stones, and it's pretty rocky. It's reasonably hilly as well.
Yeah. So we've talked about kind of your reasons, the reasons that people are joining you on this. Is there anything, because you said this has all come about organically.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know now, is there anything you would have changed from the beginning?
I think I'd have been a little bit more logistically and technically savvy.
Yeah.
Because it's been a real labour of love.
Yeah.
And it has taken up an inordinate amount of downtime, particularly at the weekends, doing what I need to do with the wildlife and setting up WhatsApp groups. I mean, if you look at my WhatsApp, you know what they look like. I send around a number of WhatsApp messages to people to remind them where to come, where to meet, and all that sort of stuff. And then send some sort of warm-up photographs of the last few loops so that they can see what it's all about. And there's a nice article that's been written about it and stuff. And so I often send that around so people have got a bit of an idea. But it is a bit of a technical effort, logistical effort. So I perhaps would have been a bit more conscious of that. Quite a lot of this stuff that we've been talking about has really developed over time. And that's what's nice, actually, because it wasn't planned. I didn't have all the speech that we've gone through and I've talked to you about today right at the beginning. So in a way, morning, I may have liked to have had that a bit more sort of clarified in my head beforehand. But also in another way, it's rather nice not to have had it, because it's sort of, as confidence has grown in what I'm doing, I've thought more about it and realised what it's about. So it's a bit of both on that one, I think, really.
Yeah.
But no, otherwise, it's just been a really lovely experience. And I'm genuinely worried about what will happen next year. I mean, not in a bad way, but what happens when on the 14th of January, I wake up and I don't have to come out here. It'll be odd, but also liberating as well. But I've now got to think of something else to do.
Well, there's that thing about, you kind of gear up for this big thing. Like, people gear up for their first big marathon.
Yes.
And it becomes this year-long effort, and then they do it, and then there's almost like a letdown after it.
Yeah, exactly. It's an anticlimax. Morning. An anticlimax. No, I'll have to get something sorted out as well, and I will do. There'll be a tail on this. There'll be a sort of long tail. And to be fair, I'm still going to be doing a lot with the charity. I just think they're great. I'm committed to doing a lot for them going forward from here. And I will do that, but it may be just not quite as sort of high profile or relatively profile as it has been over the last 6 months or so. Yeah.
You know what I like to believe is that once you start walking, the path reveals itself.
Yeah. It's so true. And I was thinking about that last night, thinking about this. And I was thinking, what would I say in response to that? But you're absolutely right. You don't need to necessarily plan everything. Some things do just come naturally. And walking the path of life does take you down different routes, and sometimes not great ones, sometimes dead ends, and sometimes incredibly long ones. And this one has been one of the long ones. And I think that hopefully when we reach the crossroads or T-junction or whatever it is we get to in January, I'll take the next right one to get to the next place. But it's good. It's good.
Thank you for listening today. I hope this has been a useful investment of your time. If you feel inspired by this episode, please rate it and consider subscribing. I'm keen to know how it's impacted you.